Is Riyadh disassociating with its all-time closest ally, the United States of America? With news of Saudi Arabia knocking at the Brics door, many experts are speculating about huge changes in the global economy and world order. Will Saudi Arabia's entry into the Brics be a game changer for their economy? If so, how did it lead to the collapse of the US dollar? Saudi Arabia was an all-weather friend to the United States, but the recent developments have led Saudi-US relations to an all-time low. It all started with the Russia-Ukraine war. As oil prices fell low due to the war, Saudi Arabia and other oil-producing nations feared a collapse of their economy. As a result, Saudi Arabia and other OPEC Plus nations agreed to cut down oil production, which worsened the galloping inflation in the US. Riyadh refused Washington's request to revamp the oil production, and in retaliation, US President Joe Biden threatened Riyadh with unspecified consequences, even threatening its security. To rub salt on the injury, an American citizen was sentenced to 16 years in prison in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia over tweets critical of the regime. Another snub happened when Riyadh didn't offer an invitation to American officials for an investment conference in Saudi. These developments have created a bent in the Saudi-US relations. And now Saudi has shocked the world by knocking at the door of the Brics. Is there a Cold War between Saudi and the US? Why is Saudi joining Brics, and is it a big deal? To understand this further, let's dig a little deeper into these developments, both their political and economic background. Brics comprises of 5 emerging economies, namely Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The Brics was created as an alternative to the Western blocs to counter its hegemony in geopolitics and world order. Many people underestimated Brics as they were an alliance of emerging economies compared to G7, which had developed countries such as Japan, Canada, and the US. But if you look closely, all the Brics nations shared 41% of the world's population, and their combined GDP is over $2.4 trillion US dollars. On top of that, they have substantial military capability and an increasing influence in the global sphere. And by coming together, this group commands a voice for itself in the global sphere. Recently, many countries like Iran, Argentina, and France have shown interest in joining Brics. Brics expansion is now under consideration. Why does Saudi Arabia want to join Brics? Saudi's proposed entry into the Brics has several reasons. As a result of the Russia-Ukraine war, oil prices first skyrocketed, but then dropped lower than pre-war prices. As a global recession looms, Saudi and other OPEC Plus nations, to increase their revenues, decided to cut oil production by 2 million barrels per day, which created havoc in the West, especially in the US economy, by further increasing inflation. To punish Saudi, the US even challenged the security of Saudi. This was, in turn, a violation of the Petrodollar agreement signed between the US and Saudi. Simply put, the Petrodollar agreement allows Saudi to sell oil in US dollars, while the US provides security to Saudi by trading weapons. Further, Saudi was already diversifying its arms trade by making defense deals with Russia and China so that they are not over-dependent on the US. Another reason is the US lifting the economic sanctions on Iran, Saudi's arch-nemesis in the Middle East. The 3 Brics countries, namely Russia, China, and India, are the world's largest oil consumers. So Saudi joining the world's biggest oil buyers is a game changer. The first thing that can happen if Saudi joins the Brics is that the US economy will be on its path to ruin as the US bank rates will spike. This can be a disaster for the US economy. But what does Saudi joining Brics do with US banks' interest rates? It will stop petrodollar recycling. For those who don't know, let's briefly explain what petrodollar recycling is. Since most oil trade can be done only in US dollars, all the countries keep dollar reserves with the US banks. They use the dollars for oil trade and the surplus for other trade purposes, or they invest it in the US economy in the form of US Treasury bonds. This amounts to $7.5 trillion US dollars and is used by American banks to lend American businesses at very low interest rates. As a result, debt is very cheap in the US. Thus, American business prosper and so does their economy. Thus, Saudi selling oil gives the US a $7 trillion advantage. But when they join the Brics, they can sign the bilateral currency swap agreement by which the Brics countries do not have to buy oil in dollars. What is a bilateral currency swap agreement? Let's say China and UK sign a bilateral currency swap agreement for $1 million. It means China will sell $1 million worth of yen to the UK, and the UK will sell $1 million worth of pounds to China. After conversion, China will give 6.842 million yen to the UK, and UK will give China £847,250, and they will agree upon the exchange rate to be 8.07. For 5 years, Chinese central bank can sell these pounds and get dollars, or it can lend pounds to domestic banks and companies to settle their trade. Similarly, the Bank of England can do the same with yen. So if an English businessman wants to buy 1 million yen worth of goods from China, and if he went by conventional means, he would have to pay pounds to the English bank, which will then convert the sum to dollars, and then it will transfer the dollars to the US bank account of China, and then the Chinese bank will transfer the converted sum of yen to the Chinese businessman. But now the English businessman will simply borrow 1 million yen from the Bank of England and directly pay the Chinese bank account in England. China would transfer 1 million yen to the Chinese businessman, and the same thing could be done vice versa. Can you see that two big players can now do international trade without depending on the US dollar? This is how bilateral currency swap works. In this way, both countries will get three major advantages. 1. Both countries can eliminate their exchange risks. 2. Both countries can use this currency to exchange it for dollars if needed. 3. Businesses in both countries can carry out trade more economically, so the business relation with both these countries gets better and better. And most importantly, the dependency on the US dollar can be decreased to a large extent. Also, China has launched an alternative international payment network called the M-Bridge prototype to bypass the SWIFT network by making international transactions with central bank digital currency. This is done in collaboration with many banks and financial agencies worldwide. If this prototype becomes successful, it will become yet another challenge for SWIFT. To combat this, America is looking into launching the digital dollar and is keeping up with the global economic war. Moreover, if Saudi joins BRICS, two of the biggest oil consumers would not use dollars for trade. If China alone sells its dollar reserve, it can dent the American economy. There is more to it. Russian President Vladimir Putin has come up with what he calls the BRICS currency, a basket of currencies that has the value of the BRICS countries' currencies, which are the Chinese renminbi, Russian ruble, Indian rupee, the Brazilian real, and the South African rand. This basket would make it semi-decentralized and more stable than the US dollar. To give the currency even more power and stability, according to experts, the BRICS currency could be gold-backed. In simple words, the value of a gold-backed currency is pegged to gold. This means that gold-backed currency is more stable compared to fiat currencies, which can create inflation. So traders will be more confident when it comes to a gold-backed currency. While Saudi joining the BRICS squad, oil can also lay the foundations of the BRICS currency. Two of the most valuable things on this planet backing a currency. Can you imagine powerful and stable that currency is? This is why the entire world is watching what Saudi does and how it will change the world order with BRICS, putting an end to the American hegemony. Will the US combat Saudi move to join the BRICS? What do you think are the greatest challenges the US dollar is facing in 2023? Comment your opinions below. Thank you, and for more videos like this, subscribe to our channel.